either of these engagements, if you were to add the layer of generative AI today, do you see them being any different, more efficient?
So it builds a universe based on the universe that it was trained on. That's what each machine is, right? Hard work. It's a long, hard work involved in actually getting done. But none of this was available.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct. Yes.
5 years ago or 6 years ago,
Yes.
right? And it's going to get much, much better in the years to come.
How do you view the term decision intelligence?
What is new today, right? With this advent of AI, artificial intelligence, in what way do we say AI is different from BI, right? How to find the value in it is the first problem that we all have to.
Hello everyone, welcome to our podcast Decoding Decisions. I'm Vishal, Reddy. I head the strategy and M&A practice at CRMIT. I am accompanied by Padmanabha, also known as Paddy. Paddy is our thought leader and principal consultant in the area of data to decisions at CRMIT Solutions. Paddy, thank you for being here. Good to talk about data to decisions today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Vishal.
So, Paddy, first of all, I wanted to start off today's podcast by asking you the very basic of questions, which is, what is, in your opinion, or how do you view the term decision intelligence?
I mean, on the face of it, decision intelligence, all intelligences that goes into making a decision, right? But that's too abstract. But let's dig a bit maybe into it, right? Anything and everything that is required to even first compose a decision, to even decide if something is a decision, what is a decision, and then to make that decision, and then maybe to review that decision, right? So anything and everything that goes into, say, these three things, to decide if this is a decision, and then to make that decision, and then, of course, later on to review that decision, right? I would say that is decision intelligence. So it's a big universe in itself. Each of those three things can involve a lot of things. Figuring out what is a decision. Is this a decision? What is a decision to be made? Even just identifying what a decision is a key creative aspect of what we do in business, right? In our lives too, right? So there are many things that goes into figuring out what is the decision to take. Being clear about what the decision itself is. There's an intelligence required to that. There are many things to be thought through, right? So that's part of it. And then we make a decision. What all do you need to make a decision, right? It's all just optionality, right? So that too requires a lot of intelligence or things to be known, many things to be incorporated, right? In making that decision, right? And then, of course, once you made a decision, it's always an optionality. Nothing is black and white. You want to review if your process of making decisions was in some way flawed, or you want to improve and so on. So there's, again, other things you need to find out to review the decisions, maybe immediately, later on, and so on. So all of that comes under the rubric and umbrella of this decision intelligence, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, interestingly, when we talk about some of the technology components which make up the whole idea of a practice of decision intelligence or implementing it, we talk about historically data and analytics and some of those specifics, right? Those are mostly to do with past data and how the decisions that you have made in the past, which you have realized it's kind of like post-mortem assessment. That's how it's been typically. But now with emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence, how do you see them enabling businesses to implement decision intelligence with ease, Paddy?
That's a big topic by itself. So like you rightly said, from the dawn of time, we've been doing business intelligence. I mean, I'm not even talking of IT. Literally, business intelligence is what we do. When you want to run a business, you track your data, your information, and you take your decisions on that. And you're constantly reviewing them to see, how good or bad your decisions were, right? And the market is, of course, your biggest feedback source. It tells you if your decisions were good or bad, or how good or bad they were. So BI as such is a common thing that we all do, right? But to your question, which is what is new today, right? With this advent of AI, artificial intelligence, in what way do we say AI is different from BI, right? Again, AI is a pretty big term by itself.
Yes.
If you talk in terms of technology, and AI in that sense is probably a bit more technological than perhaps BI is,
Yes.
right? BI is probably more associatable with your brain itself, but
Correct.
AI literally is an artificial part of it. You know, we're
Yes.
trying to replicate what the human brain does, right? In that sense, it's probably about 60, 70-year-old as a technology, as a technical thing, right? So there have been waves, right? Different approaches and all that. We used to talk of expert systems in the 80s, right? In the 90s too, we had computer-aided software engineering and computer decision support systems and so on,
Yeah.
right? In the last 20, 15, 20 years, we've had the advent of big data, right? Machine
Yes.
learning, as we call them. Cloud made it possible to be able to process, first of all, both collect and store humongous amount of data. We came to call that as big data. And then CPU became relatively cheap, and machine learning algorithms got developed. Because CPU was cheap, compute became cheap, you could invest in algorithms and process that humongous amount of data. That was the last 15 years, right? We call them machine learning, but that was another first wave of, let's say, a more commoditized AI, right? Actually, that's when we started using AI in a much more common pedestrian sense, right, across the enterprise world and so on. And the last 5 years, as we've all seen, really the generative AI, which is an entirely new paradigm, right?
Yes.
It's about language. It's not really about numbers per se. It's about statistics, but nonetheless, it's about language. The core thing that we all humans deal with. We talk about language. Maths is not how we literally communicate, and our worlds of business is not based on maths. It's really,
Yeah.
maths is also in that sense, it's only for accounting and, measuring in that sense, right?
Yes.
Right. But the actual selling and making are in terms of first really language, the ideational part, right? So in that sense, this new wave, as we call that, the Gen AI, generative AI, LLMs, large language
Yeah.
models, in that sense, a new paradigm, right? Compared to the previous waves. They're not an incremental step function. They are a new paradigm. So in that sense, so yeah. So back to your main question, Vishal, which is that in what way does the new wave of AI, generative AI, assist business, where they can do? That's a very big question because it's in the world of language. It's the natural home of that is the human brain, and now we're trying to make it out. When we putting it out there as a machine, right? So how do you interact with it? How do you even define if that machine is the right machine to play with, and how do you play with it? How do you utilize it? So these are very fundamental questions with the whole advent of large language models and generative AI. It used to be much more simpler with big data, which is all numbers, right, or patterns and statistics, and they're simply trends of more and more complicated quadratic equations, perhaps, but to forecast things. But nonetheless, they're purely mathematical, and they had limits too. You could build your algorithms and your models, but you knew they were limited in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So compared to that, I think the generative AI is an opportunity because it is close to the domain in which we all live as humans. But then, how exactly to use it, how to find the value in it is the first problem that we all have to think through, right? And so there is not, I wouldn't say it's a solved problem today. We have about 500-600 models now in the last 5 years in the industry, right? Each model is more or less the fundamentals are same on which they are built, but they're all using different data sets for training and so on. So the machines are different in different sense. Just yesterday we had the latest release of Claude by Anthropic, owned by Amazon, right? So each day we see some new models being developed and released. In some way different from what came before them. But really, the fundamental question still remains, how exactly to you utilize them for our business, let's say, right? I think that question is still being tracked and solved. I don't think we have an answer to that yet. It's a work in progress, I would say.
Okay. Sure. Interesting. I think the idea is everybody wants to implement generative AI. It's interesting because any CIO or any C-level dealing with technology within the organization is definitely keen to always implement what is up and coming, but definitely the use cases or the specifics, when they dive into it, there are a lot of questions and gray areas where organizations like us help them on that path and journey, right? Now, with that being said, I also wanted to understand how is the whole idea of generative AI is looking to the future, right? It is about creating those, understanding what would be the outcome of a certain decision which could be made in the future, right? So whereas BI was more to do with analyzing what happened in the past and how you can improve it accordingly. How is this different, Paddy? What I mean is it's a very interesting, it's kind of like helping you prep and be smarter for the future, if you will.
Yes.
Fundamentally, how does that change the whole dynamics of decision making? And
Agree. No, it's again a big thing. So, I mean, if you take a step back, whether in our business, right, any business, right, when you start looking at, I mean, all business is just a series of decisions. End of the day,
Yes.
From the micro, smallest level to the most strategic ones, a business is simply a collection of decisions, nothing more, right?
Yes.
And then we just take action on them. So we decide. There are so many optionalities, and that's the first thing to figure out what product to make. First, most basic thing, right?
Yeah.
How to make it, the engineering part of it, right? Where to sell it, at what price to sell it, right? Where not to sell it. It's all, everything is just decisions, right? When I want to talk to a customer, what to talk, what to pitch, right? What not to pitch. So it is just a series of decisions, right? When I put together a project team to make some customization or to implement something, right? It's all these decisions, right? So that part is clear, right? So then when we bring in generative AI, right, which is all about language, right, how we think, right? So the first thing is we take any decision, and then we have to see what is the intelligence that is required in this decision, right? Mm-hmm. So let's take the second step, which is we've already decided what the decision is, right? Mm-hmm. For example, right, let's say I need to put together a team, for a project team to implement something, right? Yeah. So I'm the project manager and I have to do the scheduling, right, find the right people, schedule them properly for the right skills and the right task orientation, and get the job done and finish the project. So that's my job role as a project manager, right? Now, those are all series of decisions, right? Now, the way we have to think through it from the perspective of generative AI, utilizing generative AI, these very powerful artificial machines, is at each of the, I have to first break them into these decisions. I have to first lay out the series of decisions involved in my work. That's the first thing. Actually defining those decisions, right, one by one, and then take the first one and then say, what are all the things, or in other words, to use your first word, what is the intelligence or intelligence is required to make that decision? I need to actually analyze that.
Yeah.
I need to take that particular decision in the abstract and then analyze what are all the things required to make that decision.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I have to first get that out, right? And when I do that, that's when I see there are things, if you really take a step, if you look into that, for the most part, most of our decisions really involve what we call a situational awareness. We are aware of, there is a universe in our brains based on which we make those decisions, right?
Correct.
And there is nothing as so trivial in any decision. Every decision involves a certain universe in our brains. Each of us may have a different universe, and that's a fact too, right?
Yeah.
But there is a universe on which the context, as we call them, I can use different words, situation, context, but it's a universe, right? It's on that basis I'm going to make a decision on that decision number one, right? And that's when you see generative AI is a useful tool. What is generative AI, right? It's what is a large language model, right? It is trained on there is a universe to that model. That machine is built to a particular universe. There is no the universe, they're all A universes by themselves, right? So each model is a universe by itself based on what it's trained for and the weights and those things that it has on which it will forecast the next token and so on, right? So it builds a universe based on the universe that it was trained on. That's what each machine is, right? So when I realize that's a decision I need, and then I see there's a machine which is almost proximate to the kind of thing that happens in my own brain, then I begin to see the opportunity to use that machine. But we are still not there in how to exactly use it. At least we see now there is something outside of me which seems to be somewhat proximately close to what I have in my own brain or the way I would think, and therefore perhaps I can outsource that part of my work to that machine, right? So that's how it is, right? And then that's the first step, right? You begin to realize that's where you can collaborate with that thing, you and that thing, you are the decision maker and that thing. And of course, to what extent to collaborate will draw all those various patterns just to support you, or you can even augment your decision, or even completely outsource. So those are different levels of how you will utilize that thing. But those are second issues. But at the minimum, that's the first thing we need to get to, that position. Each of us as decision makers in our businesses, to come to that awareness that there is something outside of me available, commoditized, relatively cheaply, right? Yeah, everything costs money, but compared to what went before decades ago, it's relatively cheap, right?
Yeah, will get cheaper soon.
Exactly, and will get cheaper. Right? Absolutely, it gets even more cheaper, right? So that's the first definition, and only then we realize, okay, now so once I realize there's something outside of me that I could utilize to work with me in my job as a decision maker. That's the first real accomplishment, right? We really see that's a paradigm shift. Earlier, I would have probably have to talk to you, talk to all my colleagues, right?
Yeah.
Or talk to myself and on my own desk. But now I could outsource, right? So outsource or take assistance software. That's the first thing, to really get that understanding. And then you go to the next level into that and see, okay, what part of the thinking that goes on in my brain on this one decision. Remember, we have some 35 decisions in my project management, project planning.
Yeah.
I'm looking at decision number 1. In that one, okay, now what aspects of my thinking can I now start relying on this machine, right? How do I prompt it? How do I utilize? So that's the whole hard work. It's a long, hard work involved in actually getting done. But none of this was available.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct. Yes.
5 years ago or 6 years ago,
Yes.
right? And it's going to get much, much better in the years to come. So this is new. It's radically new. It's powerful. It's assistant and it's a machine. I mean,
Yes.
all the benefits of machine, 24/7. It doesn't get tired, and it can keep learning all the time. I mean, as humans too, we learn. We learn, but we have a limit. So I think that's the first thing to see. To your question of how can generative AI assist in decision making, decision work, decision intelligence, it is to reach that first person, and then one by one to see, again, each person may have a different utilization for that same machine. Again, we're talking about the generative as just one machine, but like I told you, that's an industry also growing its own thing. There are several people making models, and so that too is evolving, right? It is not like some static one machine available for everybody. Like you used to have the Cray computer.
Just like a human life,
Exactly.
We moved from
So that's the work involved in that. It's hard work. I think the reason I'm highlighting that, Vishal, is because I think we tend to we all got used to this chat GPTs very quickly on a mobile phone and so on. And sometimes we might take it for granted, just as in the previous way we took the global search by Google for granted, right? People would not even type CRMIT.com on the browser. They will type CRMIT on the Google search part, right? So that's how it became, right? So it's quite easy to take it for granted and lose the value. And that's the reason I'm saying there's a lot of hard work to be done. But the power is there, the value is there. And that's what I think we all want to do.
Correct. Yeah, it's definitely a paradigm shift, and it's about getting used to anything that's new. It can be uncomfortable in a lot of situations for people to transition, for business leaders to transition, for champions to support them, but it is eventually bound to happen, is the way we see it, because it's so powerful, it's so impactful that it becomes inevitable to implement or use AI, whether it's in the form of decision support, decision augmentation, or even decision automation. We don't know when we will see that, but probably in the future for sure. But with regards to CRMIT as an organization, what we have stood for ever since inception is a company that exists to help customers make better, more informed or intelligent decisions. Right? There's always relativity, right? It can always be better, it can always be more informed. So with some of the past engagements that we have worked on, even before the widespread uttering or adoption of generative AI as a technology, how were some of those engagements different, and how did we go about, one or two of them, if you can speak for them, Paddy?
Sure. I mean, I can think of at least two long examples that we've had out of several dozens, right? The last 10 years. You don't have to go too much ancient, but we used to work for a large multinational, international bank.
Okay.
Right? And it was a front-end sales applications, right? The applications that powers the front offices of the bank, right? In some 70 countries, right? So if you look at the bank, it's just distribution. It's the core business of a bank is distribution. You want to be available everywhere so that whoever needs banking can come to you for whatever banking needs they have. It's as simple as that, right? So while you have branches and contact centers, that's your core work to be distributed everywhere, right? So when people contact you, right? And today branches are quite expensive for the customer too. You may want to invest in branches, but customers, it takes a lot of time and space, right? I mean, people have travel and so on, right? So in every country, the problem is the same, right? Branches have had reduced visitation in the last 10 years, 12 years, right? So the contact centers have become the core, point of contact for banks and their markets, right? So you'll want to build as much capability and capacity in your contact center, right? So it's no longer the old contact center of a phone. It's not just about the phone. It's all multi-channel and so on, right?
Yeah.
So in the example I want to talk about, the bank, so they decided that they realized that about 80% of the customer transactions happening through the contact center,
Okay.
right? So beyond just ramping up in terms of capacity, right? The question was, how do we utilize, that so much of time that is being spent there, invested by the customer and by the bank together in those contact centers. Typical call time used to, when they measured, I remember, I'm talking about 8-9 years ago, right? Quite old, before the advent of Gen AI, right? They were talking about 20-25 minutes average time
Okay.
spent by the customer and doing meaningful conversations. Those were not about wasted time. Those were that seemed the average time people used to spend, right? So that's a lot of time if you think about per call, right? So you want to see, and you're a bank. You are a specialist in banking and risk management. That's what you are, and that's where the customer is coming to you for something, right? So you need to exploit that time to sell, to understand and sell, right? So it is as simple as saying, okay, how best can we use in a polite fashion, in a proper fashion, not even polite, in a proper fashion, how can we use this 20 minutes that we have to also consult and sell to the customer, right? Beyond just responding to whatever request they have, which is your first response, of course, but how to advise and sell. Banking is infinite in that sense. It's an infinite game. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So this application that we had, so the requirement came from the business, from the headquarters, and said, we need to think through in a very, almost an inverted fashion. Now we have to think of that application to support the agent to sell, right?
Okay.
But not sell anything at random, which has been going for the last 30, 40 years, right? You have these scripts and you say, okay, we have these new products, just make a pitch, wild pitch, right? No, this has to be contextual to the customer, right? In the context of what the customer is probably talking, who came in, the customer walks into the contact center, right? These are all reactive calls, right? You're not making the outbound call, inbound calls, right?
Inbound
so you can't simply hijack that call and start talking about what you want, right? It has to be contextual to what the customer wants, right? So that was the requirement, right? How do we turn around this application to make it proactive, contextualized, and personalized to the customer? And you train the agent on the screen, almost in real time, because this call lands. These are, again, there are various segments in banking, right? So we're talking of some, there are categories. So these were not private banking. These were not, calls with a dedicated number. They would come on the common line, right? So whoever is picking up should have the intelligence almost in real time to do a contextualized conversation with the customer. It's not easy if you think about it, right? So that's what we did actually in an application. We set about doing it. Problem was well defined and we built. So it involved pulling in massive amounts of data, as you can imagine. That was the era of big data as well. So the idea was pull in all the data. Banks have access to a humongous amount of data of every customer, right? Right. So it was about pulling all that data, building the right taxonomies to what is useful, short term, mid term, and long term intelligence, as you call them. And then composing to what products they already have, look at the conversation and give two kinds of assistances. One, recommendations at the product level, but also a whispering recommendation to the agent, right? So to help them train in real time as they are having the conversation. And that, I think, was a sort of a decision support, if you really ask me, right? We probably didn't call it AI. We probably called it a bit of machine learning, I would say. But really, big data was the only word we all used back then. But it falls in the same category as what you might call today with generative AI, where you might use that machine to help you make some decision. This was helping the agent make a better conversation. So that's one example, right? Another example I can think of was with, again, the same domain, I would say financial services, but this one is a healthcare insurance, right? So if there the problem was a bit more intricate, there it was more about knowledge, actually, right? Again, I'm talking about 10, 11 years old stuff, right? Before Gen AI even came in, right? At least in the public domain, right? So there, the problem was that this company's requirement or the business was they had to pitch proposals and solutions to brokers, right? Who would then pitch them to the actual end customers. And these end customers are very large companies, right? So what is the product of the healthcare business, right? It's, of course, insurance, but real healthcare is their core product, right? Insurance is just the financial layer of it, right? So when they make a proposal to the broker, and who in turn makes the proposal to the actual customer, your problem, this company's problem, requirement was that they had to pull in a lot of data about their end customers, because the broker is just pitching it. They are the broker, right? So this company needs to understand the market that they're trying to reach out to, right? And this is healthcare. This is about individuals, right? They're all under one organization, one company to which they're going. But fundamentally, healthcare is a personal, private thing, right? So they had to deal with a lot of But one level, just the health data, which is just one aspect of it. And that's the whole thing, right? It's just one aspect of it. The second one is this whole chain of decision makers between me as a health insurance company and the end company whose employees I'm trying to pitch to, right? There's a whole chain of value being added there. And each of them also are dealing with different amounts and scopes of information. So for me, as a health insurance company there, I have to deal with all these different dimensions of data. So my job really to do in the pitch to the broker, there is multiple levels of information, multiple types of information to deal with, right? And the company was solid. They had a great strategy and management there. So they defined the problem. Our problem is building an application which helps us not crunch, but process, comprehend to help my sales guy, my sales team, not even one person. It was a sales team dealing with all this. To help this individual sales team or account team comprehend this information easily. You see, the word was easy because you can always spend, a god awful amount of time, 6 months to comprehend, but time to market, right? So that was the problem. In that sense, it was about AI. If you really think about it, right? It was how to build a solution to comprehend, to bring that data and information together for easy comprehension and easy processing, right? For various people. And that's what we built applications. This was like 10, 11 years ago. It's still running. It is popular.
Still running strong, yes.
So that's another example, I would say. Helping decisions.
Okay. Thank you for tuning into this podcast today, everybody. We hope this was insightful, helpful. Stay tuned to some of our other episodes under the banner Decoding Decisions. This whole play of BI and data and analytics being such a big thing, especially in the banking, financial services, insurance industry, there is a huge play for generative AI, and I don't see why for some of the engagements that we have done in this space in the past.
This concept of where to draw the line on money becomes a serious thing, right?
Yes.
Cost and value.